All right, hello and welcome to another Expert Insight interview. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP, online sales magazine, and Pipeliner CRM, joining you from San Diego. And today I'm delighted to welcome back Tatiana Tsoir, who is in New York. How are you doing, Tatiana?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. And Tatiana has, over the last 15 years, helped hundreds of businesses become more profitable, stabilize cash flow, and pay less taxes through combinations of tax strategies, operational planning, and commitment to excellence. And what we want to talk about today is actually price psychology. It's probably something that's, I would say, overlooked by a lot of businesses, maybe, or not understood properly. Pricing, I think, Tatiana, you'll probably agree that sometimes pricing is a pretty arbitrary thing that companies or entrepreneurs do without any real science behind it.
That's right. That's right. And we all have in different areas regarding different things, we have preconceived notions of how much something should cost, and usually that it kind of stays with us throughout our life. And it's really hard to get rid of those habits or prejudices, rather. Even I would call them as you kind of operate, live, whatever. So price psychology helps you understand how a buyer makes buying decisions based on price.
Yeah, because a lot of times I think people, we price things, we just look at competitors' pricing and sort of say, okay, well, here's the high end, here's the low end, maybe we should be somewhere in between.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and I mean, I'm guilty of that myself. When I started my tax practice, I asked a mentor of mine, I asked him, like, how much should I charge? So
Mhm.
he gave me some ideas, come up with an hourly rate, and stuff like that. But then, over the years, I found that hourly rate is actually not a great measurement because time is limited. And it's more about the value that I provide to the clients. But I've certainly been in the same bucket and certainly been in the same place as many entrepreneurs, especially when they're starting business or kind of just hustling with an existing business. I think that a little bit of price psychology is actually super helpful.
Yeah, so let's dive into it. So when you talk about price psychology, number one, what do you mean by that? And then secondly, how do you go about figuring it out?
So what I mean by that is how buyers of your product or service make buying decisions based on price.
Mhm.
And things like the size of the price, the length of the price, the ease to say it, all play into how our brain on the other end, on the receiving end of that price, perceives that price to be, and whether that perception is close to the truth or not. So for example, I'll give an example. For example, when you bill people, let's say monthly,
Yeah.
if you use a certain, let's say, a certain amount and you remove $1. So let's say you charge 1,000, but you do make it 9.99. People usually do the math because it's easy to round up a 9, right? But when it's a 7, people don't do the math, which is interesting.
Mhm.
So it's much, it's a different perceptions. And also when you say 7,000, the length, the verbal, the, I guess, audio length of the word is much longer than, let's say, 7K. Because of that, our brain perceives 7,000 as much higher number than 7K. 7K is, 7K.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So there's a couple of things there. So like you said, is if it's 9.99, we go, okay, so it's 1,000, basically is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But if I said to you it's 9.87, you're saying psychologically you're not going to you wouldn't round that up to 1,000.
You wouldn't, a 997 even would work
Right.
too, because people just don't do the math. That's just the stats. And what's interesting about it is that sometimes it plays, sometimes it could be used for deception, but if you use it correctly, you actually allow your buyer, your client, to compare apples to apples. So if somebody else is giving your buyer an annual price, or and you give them a monthly price, they look at it from the standpoint of, can I afford this amount a month, instead of
Mm.
rounding it up and comparing the totals for the year. And so all of these different tricks are, if used correctly, they're not deceiving. They're actually allowing your customer to see the price for what it is, and to make a decision whether the value exchange, what they're getting from you, a service or a product, is a good exchange, a good deal, in exchange for this price.
Yeah, and the second part you said there, it's really interesting as well, is like just the length of the words you use. So what you're saying is, if I said to you, okay, this is going to be 10,000, because of how long it takes to say that and for you to receive that, it's triggering other thoughts, as opposed to if I just say it's 10K, then you're like, okay, I get that now. You start look. So basically, it's you're drawing out the process. Is that it?
Yeah, pretty much. And there are different things, like when you say it out loud, when you read it. If you've ever noticed, fine dining restaurants almost never have even a dollar sign next to their price. Forget the decimal points. They don't even have the dollar sign, because the longer the price is, the higher our brain perceives it. So typically, fine dining restaurants have nailed price psychology, because they give you the title of the dish, then you read the description of it, and only after that, kind of matter of factly, somewhere in below that, like in a small font, the price is stated. And that price can be anywhere from $20 to, I don't know, 1,000, or whatever. But they never use digits. They never use decimals, because decimals actually distract a person and make the price seem higher. As opposed to like a local deli, they usually use 1995, 17.99, that kind of stuff. So in food business, it doesn't work really well. It usually works well for like a retail store, clothing, for example, but only because you're lowering the left digit. It's called the left digit management. So when something is 300, but you sell it for 299, our brain perceives it as a lower price.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's fascinating. So then, when you were like, so when you're making proposals or whatever, what are some of the things that you should be looking out for to make them more palatable?
Well, I think that we can take a step back a little bit and talk about kind of the first step for
Yeah.
someone who may be starting a business, or thinks that maybe they're undercharging. And I mean, I think that everyone should review their pricing every 6 to 12 months. But when you are kind of looking at your pricing, whether you're an experienced business owner or not, the first thing that you should do is pick a camp. And the camps are low price leadership, the IKEAs, the Southwest of the world, where you focus on two things: volume and cost cutting. And
Mm-hmm.
then the second camp is high value differentiation. So you charge an arbitrary price, meaning not a low price. You don't
Yeah.
compete on price, you compete on value. Like Apple computers, it's just a computer, but yet they're able to charge much higher prices than a PC, for example, because they provide a value. It's a status symbol, it's graphic computer, I don't know. There are a lot of different things
Yeah.
that go into that, but it's a established brand, and things like that. So um, if the problem kind of arises if you're in between, if you don't know who you are, if you try to compete on price and also try to compete on value, that's where the problems start. Because there've been cases of large companies actually failing because they couldn't make up their mind on that. So that's the first
Um,
step in your pricing journey. The second step, what you kind of asked me about, was how do you, when you're sending proposals, what do you actually do? How do you actually price, right? And that's where I typically, would say, if you're a product business, and this typically applies to a service business, but can be equally well, and Apple has proved it, be applied to a product business. You need to have three options for people. The reason that you want to have three pricing options is because there will always be people who will want an all-inclusive resort. You need to
right.
have an option that's an all-inclusive resort. But there will always be people who want to work with you but cannot afford your all-inclusive resort. For them, the lowest entry package would be great. And then also know that statistically, 60% of people will buy your middle package. What that tells you is, when you price, Make sure that that middle package has good value and also is priced with your target profit in mind.
Yeah, that's really interesting because yeah, we mean we see a lot of times. I mean, and we do it ourselves with the CRM. Is like three different price tiers, but there's a number of things here that you just said that was very fascinating. But I want to come back to that idea of falling between the two because I do think this is a trap a lot of people fall into, and it's understandable, right? Because you want to say, look, we're a high value product, but we're also great value too, and so therefore the temptation is to promote yourself as high value, but it's not reflected in your price,
Yeah.
and
And that's the
therefore, I
problem.
mean, yeah, and therefore on the receiving end is, from a psychological point of view, that's sending a mixed message, is it?
Absolutely. And there was this example that I remember doing in business school about, I think it was Tesco. It's a very
Yeah.
well-known company in Europe.
Yep.
They came to the US, they've had a lot of success adopting to local markets in Japan, in Asia,